you don't mind just talking to me a little bit about how the industry has changed throughout your career.
Okay, so I started out, I had a long career in the military, left in 2015 and joined Jaguar Land Rover, and then was the PM on the Jaguar I-Pace. And that was launched in 2018. So I took that from concept through to final production. Since that time, I've become heavily involved with EV charging across the public, domestic, commercial space and the EV OEM side as well. What I have seen with the EV industry is there's a lot more interest in it now in terms of development of cars. There's a lot more features, a lot more people are becoming aware of EVs. The EV charging side, the supporting side for EV cars is building up. And the industry, we're now past the tipping point for mass EV adoption. If you look last year, I think something like 45% of cars sold, new car registrations, were EV based, so had a battery in there somewhere that was some sort of power technology. And in 2022, you're seeing that growth carry on even further. So we're all heading for that 2030 ban on the petrol and diesel vehicles, new petrol and diesel vehicles being sold. And everything new from there on is going to be EV.
Okay, fantastic. And with that in mind, then, what would you say are the primary drivers for EV adoption?
Well, the whole EV adoption comes under what they call the climate change banner. Something like 27% of the emissions in the transport sector come from aviation, from transport for HGVs, cars, that sort of stuff. And that makes up the total emissions around the world, overall. So in terms of what needs to be done and what's driving it is people are becoming aware of it. We're starting to get people aware that an EV through its operational life no longer has emissions. Whereas you compare that to a fossil fuel car with petrol and diesel, that is emitting toxic emissions all the way through its operational life. So from a health benefit, you're benefiting by driving an EV. You're also seeing the benefits of it because cities like London, Birmingham, etc., are having these clean air zones in the middle of cities, and they're starting to expand those out to the M25 in London, where if you own a fossil fuel vehicle, you have to pay to enter that. If you've got an EV, it doesn't cost you anything to go into that zone. So it's cleaner for your health. There's also with EVs, a lot of people look at what they call the ticket price. The selling price of an EV is a lot higher than its petrol diesel equivalent. That price is coming down, and they reckon it's going to reach price parity in about 2025. And if you think of the model of, if you go out and buy the latest TV now, it will cost you thousands of pounds, but in a couple of years' time, it's a lot cheaper because it starts getting mass produced. The other thing you have to look at with EVs is what they call the TCOs, the total cost of ownership. So running an EV in terms of maintenance, in terms of tax, in terms of paying for your electric, can be about a third of the cost of the running costs of your ICE vehicle, your petrol or diesel vehicle. So there's a lot of benefits with EVs. So whilst people get put off in the media hype on it and say, oh, ticket price is expensive, if you look beyond that at the total cost of ownership, it becomes very much cheaper to operate an EV. And also, it's a lot more fun. A lot of people who step into that EV arena and buy EVs very rarely will step back and go, well, this isn't for me. I'm going to go back to a petrol or diesel vehicle, because you get the instantaneous acceleration, the zero emissions, the savings, and it's just a lot more of an enjoyable drive for people.
Okay, fantastic. And as you said there, really about the whole TCO thing, obviously that is one of the things that puts people off when they see news stories saying, oh, EVs, they can't get to A to B without running out of charge.
Yeah.
So what would you say one of the biggest challenges is for EV?
Some of the chargers, if you're going to go for a supercharger, can pay £1 per kilowatt. But do you need to have that supercharger every time you want to charge your EV? There's a whole range of chargers from 7 kilowatts right the way up to 350 kilowatts. And if you want a super fast charge that's going to do it in 20 minutes, then you're going to pay a lot more for that. If you can get away with a 7 kilowatt charger, which will put in 25 miles of range within an hour, that's going to be very much cheaper to do. And unfortunately, the way the media are done is they've just looked at the higher power chargers and go, it's £1 a minute, everyone's going to have to pay, and that scares people off. And it all comes down to how long are you going to be parked in that area. So when my companies have installed EV chargers, part of the thing you look at is the dwell time. So you say, how long is a client likely to be in that area? And that'll determine the sort of charger that they may need. So if you look at something like a hotel complex, for example, they may have a leisure facility and a restaurant where people may spend a couple of hours. So they may need a higher power charger, 50, 100 kilowatts, which will charge them in a shorter space of time. But the hotel clients and people, residential areas who park overnight on the street for several hours, 10 hours maybe, can get away with a lower power charger, 7 kilowatts. So it's a case of understanding what your needs are and how much charging you actually need. And that determines how much you want to pay to get that charge.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And I think that is something that is definitely a challenge within that aspect. I know so many people, it's one of the things that do put them off getting electric vehicles or hybrid cars.
Yeah.
So as you previously mentioned about the 2030 stopping of producing diesel and petrol cars, what would you say the future of EV looks like?
There's a lot of different solutions in the market. So if you look at EVs, for example, a lot of people think EVs are new, but EVs were actually the first electric vehicles developed in 1832. And in 1890s, EVs were outselling petrol cars because they were easy to operate. In the old days of petrol cars, you used to have to hand crank the engines. With EVs, you don't do that in 1890s. So they were outselling it. And then through time, EVs were sort of bubbling away in the background as this sort of novelty product because they couldn't really get the range and the efficiencies on it. Technology recently, in the past sort of 20 years, has really started to improve. And you start to look at the aerodynamics of the car, the efficiencies of the motors, the efficiencies of the batteries. So I think we're now seeing a massive technology growth in the EVs. The main part of the EV is the battery, obviously makes up about a third of the price of the car. And we are about to see a step change in battery technology. So at the moment, you have this terminology called range anxiety, where people are worried that the battery hasn't got enough range to get them from A to B, or it's going to take too long to charge. And you're now seeing companies develop batteries rather than taking 30 minutes, 45 minutes to do a full charge, will now do a charge in less than 10 minutes. And coupled with that, your ranges are going out from 250 miles out to 500 miles plus. So all of a sudden, if you're recharging the battery within 10 minutes, that makes it very like a petrol or diesel vehicle when you're fully, you're refueling your vehicle at a petrol station. You're getting ranges of 500 miles, which makes them comparable to your conventional petrol and diesel vehicle. And a lot of people go on, I need something that'll do 500 miles in one go. People don't drive 500 miles in one go. They don't tend to. Your body will not allow you to do that. You have to take a comfort break and stretch your legs. And during that time, you can be plugging your EV in and topping up your charge. You don't need a full charge, but you can just top up as you go along. So I see the whole EV industry evolving on that sort of thing as the battery technology gets better, the ranges improve, the charge times improve. There'll be better efficiencies on the car. There will be other technology that people talk about. There's talk about hydrogen fuel cell cars and hydrogen cars, but they are very, very much in the infancy stage of development at the moment. And as it is, Shell are currently closing down some of their public hydrogen recharge points in the UK. There's only 12 public ones out there compared to the thousands of EV charge points. So they've got a long way to go if they're going to get up there. But EVs, in my mind, under the climate change banner, are going to be the way forward in the transport industry.